Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Sitosina Jaya Sitosina Sitosina Jaya Sitosina Jaya Gaurani Jaya Jaya Maya Bhosati Jaya Gaurani Jaya Jaya Maya Bhosati Jaya Vrisingare Jaya Vrisingare Jaya Vrisingare Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya 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 Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya 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 Krishna Fatima Vasi Rajacharya Rasta Pranata Shri Srimad Bhagavatam Bhakti Swami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada Ki Iskon Bhakti Founder Acharya Shri Prabhupada Ki Jaya Krishna Fatima Vasi Rajacharya Rasta Pranata Shri Srimad Shri Bhakti Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Shri Guru Parampara Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Rantra Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Nitai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga. All Vishnu Daya, Krishna Master, Krishna Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Preaching to America. The day after Rath Yatra, Srila Prabhupada met with a room full of people, including 2 reporters and several parents of his disciples. The reporters were Miss Sandy Nixon, a freelance writer, and from the Philadelphia Inquirer, and Ms. Jones, the same woman who had spoken with Srila Prabhupada at the airport. Seeing japa beads around Miss Nixon's neck, Prabhupada said, "She is a devotee." She was chanting. Ms. Nixon said she was writing a book on the popular gurus and had about 15 questions to ask Srila Prabhupada. "I'm going to ask you questions," she said. Most of the time, I might be able to answer them myself. Srila Prabhupada seemed to like her, if only because she wore the japa beads. But some of the devotees flinched at her remark about already knowing the answers to the questions she was about to ask. How did Krishna consciousness develop, Miss Nixon asked. Krishna consciousness is already there in everyone's core of heart, replied Srila Prabhupada. You've seen how during the whole procession they were chanting and dancing in ecstasy. So do you think that is artificial? No. Artificially, nobody can chant and dance for hours together. That means the awakening of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada patiently and carefully answered each question about Christ, about gurus, about the daily lives of the devotees. While discussing the evils of a godless society, he mentioned the slaughter of cows. It is an innocent animal, he said. It is simply eating grass given by God and supplying milk. And from milk we can live. And the gratefulness is, cut her throat. Is that civilization? What do you say? I agree 100%, Miss Nixon replied. I want you to say these things instead of me. I am asking the questions for others, of course, who do not understand Krishna consciousness. Again, the devotees flinched. That Prabhupada did not always respond to a person's attitude or nuance did not mean that he was imperceptive. Sometimes he chose not to relate to a certain idiom or react to a certain foolishness, like Miss Nixon's claims to be an expert on Krishna consciousness. And often he ignored a person's trivial conversation or mundane philosophy. But he was always in touch with whomever he talked to, addressing that person's true self-interest. He knew Miss Nixon didn't know the answers to the questions he asked, and he understood that she was, despite her temporarily donned japapis, not inquiring as a submissive disciple. Nonetheless, he was compassionate, answering to enlighten both her and her readers. Miss Nixon plunged onward. How do you feel about women's lib? Prabhupada remained silent, and the devotee repeated, she wants to know about the women's liberation. What is your feeling about women's liberation? That I don't want to discuss, said Srila Prabhupada, because Srila Prabhupada's serious expression slowly changed to a smile, and then he laughed. Everyone laughed. The Chicago remarks were famous. On the one hand, he didn't want to start another controversy, but he did want to clear up the issue. He continued, as you have asked, so I may explain how the foolish women are being cheated by the intelligent men. In your country, they have given you liberty. Liberty means equal rights. It's not. Man and women have equal rights. Miss Nixon, they are trying in this country. All right, trying. But you women, you cannot see this so-called equal rights means treating the women. Now I say more clearly that a woman and man meet. Now they become lovers, then they have sex, and the woman becomes pregnant and the man goes away. The simple woman, she has to take charge of the child and beg for government alms. Please give me money. This is your independence. So you admit this is independence? Or she tries to kill the child. Do you think it is very good independence? What is your answer? Srila Prabhupada looked challengingly at both women. They had asked their questions, now he was asking. Ms. Jones, what is my answer to whether or not I was going to kill a child? Is that the question? Prabhupada, yes, they are killing now, abortion. Ms. Jones, well, she has made the choice. Prabhupada, you have made your choice to kill your child. Is that a very good choice? Ms. Nixon, it's the worst crime you could make. Srila Prabhupada to Ms. Jones, do you think it is a very good business? Ms. Jones, I think it is a very complicated question. Prabhupada, therefore I say they are cheating you in the name of independence. That you do not understand. They are cheating you and you are thinking you are independent. Ms. Nixon, they forget the responsibility that comes with freedom. Prabhupada, yes, they, the men, do not take the responsibility. They go away. They enjoy and go away. And the woman has to take the responsibility. Either kill the child or maintain begging. Do you think begging is very good? In India, although they are poverty-stricken, still they do not become independent. They remain under the care of the husband, and he takes all responsibility. She has neither to kill the child nor to beg for maintaining the child. So which is independence? To maintain under a husband is independence, or to become free to be enjoyed by everyone. There is no freedom, but still they think they have freedom. That means under some plea the men are cheating the women, that's all. So in the name of independence they have agreed to be cheated by another class. And that is the situation. Prabhupada explained that the Krishna consciousness movement had the highest regard for women, but to protect them from this exploitation by man, he said, we teach that you do like this, you do like that, you be married, be settled up, don't wander independently. We teach them like that. But so far Krishna consciousness is concerned, we equally distribute. There is no such thing that, oh, you are a woman less intelligent or more intelligent, therefore you cannot come. We don't say that. We welcome woman, man, poor, rich, everyone, because on that platform there is equality. That is equality. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 5. Lord Rishabdev's teachings, text 33. Okay, it's a prose verse, so I'll just read it myself. Tasya haya parishusravi sogandhya vayustam tesham tashayojanam samantat surabim chakara. Please repeat. Tasya is. Indeed. Ya which. Purisha of the stool. Of the stool. Surabi by the aroma. Saugandhya possessing a good fragrance. Vayu, the air. Tam, that. Desham, country. Dasha, up to 10. Yojanam, yojanas. 1 yojana equals 8 miles. Samantat, all around. Surabim, aromatic. Chakara, made. Translation. Because Lord Rishabdev remained in that condition, the public did not disturb him, but no bad aroma emanated from his stool and urine. Quite the contrary, his stool and urine were so aromatic that they filled 80 miles of the countryside with a pleasant fragrance. Please repeat. Because Lord Rishabdev remained in that condition, the public did not disturb him, but no bad aroma emanated from the stool and urine. Quite the contrary, his stool and urine were so aromatic that they filled 80 miles of the countryside with a pleasant fragrance. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. From this we can certainly assume that Lord Rishabdev was transcendently blissful. His stool and urine were so completely different from material stool and urine that they were aromatic. Even in the material world, cow dung is accepted as purified and antiseptic. A person can keep stocks of cow dung in one place and it will not create a bad odor to disturb anyone. We can take it for granted that in the spiritual world, stool and urine are also pleasantly scented. Indeed, the entire atmosphere became very pleasant due to Lord Rishabhadev's stool and urine. Amagana Timarandasya Kyananjana Shlakaya Chakshurumanitam Jena Tasma Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Shtapatami Anubhutale Swayamrupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadhutam Harijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lavita Shiva Shivam Vitam Shah Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhye Vacha Patitano Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Translation again. Because Lord Rishabhdev remained in that condition, the public did not disturb him, but no bad aroma emanated from his stool and urine. Quite the contrary, his stool and urine were so aromatic that they filled 80 miles of the countryside with a pleasant fragrance. So this is a very stark example of the transcendental nature of the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and all of its incarnations also. The nature of the body of the Lord is only superficially similar to the nature of our material bodies, because we've been conditioned to see things through the medium of sense gratification, and especially through vision. We've been, at least in from childhood, we've, according to how things feel, touch, smell, taste, and we've built our picture of reality from our own sense gratification. So therefore, even though we read so much Shastra and so many descriptions of Vishnu Tattva, the nature of Lord Vishnu, still when we hear about a body, we have a tendency to visualize things in terms of our own experience, and even like our own experience from an early age. Even though we may have imbibed a lot of the teachings of the Shastras and imbibed the teachings of our gurus, still, like it's second nature just to make comparisons between our sensory perception, our sense gratification, and what we read or hear or perceive about others, and here specifically about the Supreme Lord. Srila Prabhupada says, we can take it for granted that in the spiritual world, stool and urine are also pleasantly scented. And everything in the spiritual world, everything in Krishna's pastimes and the pastimes of Krishna's avatars, and Krishna's eternal associates, everything is pleasant, everything is blissful, everything is eternal, everything exists for the pleasure of Krishna and Krishna's devotees. But by exhibiting these pastimes of an avadhuta, and specifically here, in the previous verse we read that Lord Rishabdev smeared his whole body with his own stool and urine so that opposing elements might not come and disturb him. So in this activity, he helps us become aware of this conditioning that we have. And he also, by doing this, he also attracts the attention of persons who are like aspiring to follow the path of the sannyasi, or the follow the path of perhaps even of a yogi, who are embarking upon great austerities and renunciation, to devote their lives entirely to spiritual pursuits. So one can imagine that Lord Rishabdev is the hero of sannyasis, is the hero of mystic yogis, because of his complete and supreme example of detachment. So in the sense, that his the way that he interacted with others was completely for their benefit, and also for the benefit of those who would hear about his activities. So he had no obligation or inclination to react in response to the any interaction with the material elements. There was no obligation and no inclination to do so. All of his activities were purely motivated. So Srila Prabhupada actually gives a class on this verse. Actually, many devotees give a class, even though it's a short verse, a short purport. There's many classes available to listen to, and there's some interesting points. One of the points that Srila Prabhupada makes is that actually all of our senses and all of our bodily parts and limbs and bodily functions, they're all actually sources of uncleanliness, misery, disturbance, disappointment, and also they're a source of illusion, covering our perception, covering our spiritual perception. Srila Prabhupada quotes the verse, Ata Shri Krishna Namadi, Nabhavam Grayam Indriyaya Sevanmukhi Jivado Swayameva Sparatika. That one cannot understand Krishna's name, form, qualities, and activities with these blunt material senses. But if we begin, if we adopt service to Krishna, beginning with the tongue, then gradually our pure consciousness becomes illumined by the mercy of the Lord. it's natural for us to think of stool and urine as being abominable or disgusting or not disgusting, but dangerous, you could say, or impure. But Srila Prabhupada, in many of his lectures, and also in many of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's bhajans, also states that all of our senses are a network of paths leading to death. And also Srila Prabhupada gives the example of, in regard to the tongue, and the tongue has two functions, vibrating sound and tasting. So in terms of vibrating sound, Srila Prabhupada gives this example that if we're not using our tongues to vibrate the messages of Krishna and Krishna's devotees, and our tongues are just like the croaking of frogs, inviting death. Actually, there's an expression in the English literature: loose tongues cost lives. And my mother often used to quote this to me. I think it was very much used during the wartime, when gossip could risk the lives of soldiers who may be in captivity.
Never seen sleep shots.
Oh yeah, that's another one. Yeah. And so the senses are a network of paths leading to death, and of all the senses, the tongue is most voracious and uncontrollable. Srila Prabhupada in this regard also quotes Savai Mana Krishna Gadaravindayo, that Ambarish Maharaj, although not trained in like austerities like Vasi Muni, but still he surpassed the mystic yoga of Vasi Muni by engaging all of his senses in the service of the Lord. So in this way, and it's also gold is described as yellow stool to a renunciant, and to anyone on the spiritual path. That actually in the pastime of Krishna knocking down the twin Arjuna trees, and then in that purport where Srila Prabhupada is describing how Nalakuvara and Manigriva became offensive, and then he describes that of all opulence, it's the most intoxicating opulence is wealth. Because when one has excess money, one imagines that he's completely independent and can always extricate himself from any difficulty with money, and therefore he loses all respect for seniors. So in that sense, wealth is like stool, because it's the most dangerous thing to possess. So therefore, again, a renunciant, one who's on the path, who's made the determination to surrender to Krishna on the path of renunciation, he sees gold and also others' property, and also women, or like any symbols of wealth or opulence or sense gratification. And a sannyasi sees it as being no more valuable than the stool. Urine is described by Srila Rupa Goswami. Urine, that pride, the anartha of pride, is he compares to the urine of an ass. So we're in the process of engaging all of our senses in Krishna's service. Then the first stage is to engage the working senses, and the knowledge-acquiring senses, and especially in the association of devotees in the temple and on the Sankirtan, Harinam Sankirtan, and in maintaining the temple facilities and in serving the devotees, serving prasadam. There's lots of nice opportunities to engage all of our senses, all of our knowledge-acquiring senses, and all of our working senses. But then the next stage, or simultaneously with this, then we're beginning to control the internal senses. And this is like a more difficult stage in one sense, because it's not so easy to perceive the enemies. So Srila Rupa Goswami is describing that in that process, and even one who's come to the level of sense control can be attacked by pride, and that it's like a very abominable enemy. So, so basically, Srila Prabhupada in his commentary on this verse and in many other verses in this chapter is, indicating that Lord Rishabhdev is teaching his sons and teaching us that whatever attraction we have for anything in the material world, it is like stool. It's like immediately contaminating. It's immediately contaminating, and it's just as it's an injunction in Vedic Shastra that if one who's engaged in any deity worship, if they touch the stool of an animal, immediately they have to take a bath. So similarly, Srila Prabhupada is and the acharyas are saying that as soon as we touch any pride, as soon as we allow ourselves to be intoxicated by pride, intoxicated by excess wealth, intoxicated by meditating on enjoying the senses, then we're actually like bathing in an abominable substance which can completely contaminate our whole consciousness, so much so that we can commit offenses very, very easily. So Srila Prabhupada says, but we're fortunate that by the mercy of Krishna and the mercy of Lord Chaitanya especially, then if we allow our tongue to touch the name of Krishna, then simultaneously, similarly, we can be immediately purified. Like our whole consciousness can be immediately purified just by chanting one name offenselessly. And also by taking prasadam. Always, Srila Prabhupada says, by chanting the holy name just once offenselessly, and by always taking prasadam, by never eating anything which is not prasadam, then our body remains protected and immunized. Our body becomes immunized, and by chanting the holy name, our consciousness can become immediately purified. So I'll stop there. I haven't got anything more written down. Are there any comments or questions in this verse?
In the text leading up to this one, it says that they were throwing steel at him and rust and doing all kinds of like offensive things. And then so he finally decided he would find a way to keep them away, to keep them at harm's way. So he doesn't mention it so much there, but obviously he was very humble and very forgiving. He wasn't become resentful or take offence. So on his side, he didn't take any offence. But is it the case that that they can still get a reaction for being offensive, even though the person they're doing it to even take offense.
Well, it's interesting. I was reading actually last night the pastime of Bali Maharaj and Lord Vamanadev, and in the purport of one of those verses, and Srila Prabhupada says that the Supreme Lord will appear in a form that the devotee can handle. So Srila Prabhupada actually used that expression, and in the sense that he uses it in that colloquial sense, he can manage it, he can handle it. So, in Lord Rishabhdev here this wasn't an impious land where we've just been reading about Maharaj Priyabrat and Maharaj Agnitra, and it was like a very pious kingdom. So, so as we know, peer pressure is very, very strong. So when, especially children and Shudras and persons who don't have a very strong will to do the right thing, they're very easily influenced by demoniac people, and often out of fear. So that's why, I'm kind of reading this into it in one sense, because it's the whole theme of the Bhagavatam is that, like great Krishna conscious kings and obviously incarnations of Krishna, they're simultaneously interacting with all of the people, and they know the desires of all the people. So it's like that. So obviously the Lord doesn't want people to be offensive to him, and not only does he not want them to be offensive, he doesn't want them to be, he doesn't want to create a society of people who are antagonistic towards him. He doesn't want to have a reputation for the rest of his life of just being followed by rowdy demoniac people, because then his devotees or his neophyte devotees won't actually have an opportunity to appreciate him. But here when he lies down, he says, so that opposing elements might not come and disturb him. So what's his function? His function is to, he comes Paritranaya Sadhanam Vinashya Paritranaya Sadhanam Vinashya Chaduskritam Tamasam Sthapanatya Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. So he's coming to teach renunciation, but he also is coming, but he doesn't just want to teach renunciation to the most advanced renunciants, but he also wants to give mercy to those who are just beginning on that path. But they're perhaps, those who are beginning are perhaps just afraid to go anywhere near him if he's constantly going to be surrounded by ruffians. But now by lying down and his body's very aromatic, a pleasant fragrance. So I was thinking about this actually, that the demons probably wouldn't have thought, oh, it's a nice fragrance coming from the Supreme Lord here. They're thinking, God, this guy's really lost it, it's not only is he trying to be like a far out sannyasi traveling around with matted hair and being a pretender, but now he's really lost it, lying down. So in that sense, before he lay down in his stool and he was just traveling with matted hair and looking mad, then, he might have looked like a bogi yogi or a sort of, some kind of sannyasi, some kind of yogi. But now he's doing something which is out of anybody's realm of understanding. But at the same time, we're still reading about his pastimes millions of years later. We're still able to, anyway, that's my understanding based on how incarnations of the Lord perform their pastimes. Actually, in that pastime of Bali Maharaj and Lord Vamanadev, when Lord Vamanadev like extends his leg to like Janaloka, Tapaloka, Mahaloka, Satyaloka, and when Lord Brahma sees the Lord, then like he gathers together all of the sages and the higher demigods, and they have like a big Sankirtan party, and they're like, it says they're dancing and blowing their conch shells and singing the glories of the Lord. But then that's when Lord Vamanadev returns to his Vamana Rupa, his human-like form. And Srila Prabhupada says, so that the devotees can handle it. It's not that Lord Brahma couldn't handle the enormous form, but some of the associates who Lord Brahma was with wouldn't have been able to worship the Lord in such a awesome. They would have been unable to worship the Lord in that form. So that's what I did think about this quite a lot. So that's why I was sharing my kind of meditation on it. But do you have anything to add?
No, I just wondered because it seemed very offensive when they did the Shukadeva Goswami. They were all making fun of him because he was walking around naked. But when he walked into the assembly and they saw how much respect he was being shown, he became afraid and he thought, oops. And they all ran away. They all lived something similar that happened the other day. That is what Rishikesh was showing. It must have been amazing. He said 80 miles.
Yes.
80 miles, yes. Unbelievable, yes. It must have been amazing to come in contact with that.
Well, I mean, obviously the people who were following him around, throwing stones and things, they had nothing better to do with their life. They're not it's not like the king's coming out and it's like, it's like people are just hassling devotees on Sankirtan and Harinam. But because people are hassling devotees on Harinam and Sankirtan, then it will also prevent people who are a bit timid from, even if they may feel put off from approaching the devotees, if they think that, these are nice people, but I don't really want to be around. I don't really want to be in that environment where they're not willing to surrender into that sort of sangha. It's interesting when Krishna kills Pujana and they burn Pujana's body, then there's also a nice aroma for, many, many miles around. So,
it just reminds me, they say that man was made in the image of God, and the tendency is that we try to see God made in the image of man. That's the intention people have in making God in the image of man. But we're a reverse of what it's supposed to be like. So Krishna's body, nothing that comes out of his body is unpleasant. And then we have this body, and we're thinking of his body in terms of what is really, really nice. Demarcation showing, well, this is what a spiritual body functions with, and this is what the mundane body is like. So although it seems similar, but like an inferior version of what it's supposed to be like.
Yeah. Actually, Chaitanya Chandra makes a comment on this verse. Someone asks him the question, because he quotes this verse in one of his spiritual scientist articles, and then someone asked the question, I didn't think there was any stellium urine in the spiritual world anyway. And Chaitanya Charan says that, if it can facilitate Krishna's pastimes, then that's the only reason anything exists in the spiritual world, is to facilitate Krishna's pleasure. And because Gokula Vrindavan, Brahma Vrindavan is like just a reflection of the spiritual world and the material world, then it's not that everything that happens in Brahma Vrindavan has to happen in the spiritual world, but the fact that it does happen in Brahma Vrindavan means that it may be a reflection of the eternal pastimes. We don't know which when we know our acharyas tell us that some of them are like eternal pastimes and some of them are nimitika, but there are other things which the acharyas don't necessarily describe. I did try to find it, but I couldn't. And Jiva Goswami brings it up in one of his commentaries in the Brahma Samhita that there's no reason to assume that there's that there's no reason to assume that things which we consider to be just mundane can't exist in the spiritual world. If we see them in Krishna's pastimes in the material world, then and we accept that the pastimes in the spiritual world are reflected on the material plane, then there's no reason for us to assume that they can't be going on in the spiritual world unless it's explicitly stated by the acharyas to be the case. Mahatma Prabhu gives a nice class on this verse as well. Might be interested to listen to it. Talk straight. Mahatma Prabhu gives a class on this verse. And as you can imagine, then he spends most of the class talking about the holy name, but in terms of he also talks. Mahatma Prabhu also talks about that just like Srila Prabhupada was speaking in Leela Amrita about how abominable it is that women become exploited by unscrupulous men. So just as almost everybody thinks of stool and urine as being like disgusting substances, so most civilized, cultured, kind of morally inspired people think of adultery and debauchery as being abominable. And and especially debauchery, which is like continuously going on, like without any apparent sort of response to outrage. So Krishna not only is a debauchee, but he doesn't even respond to the outrage of the whole community against him. That he's like enjoying with other people's wives. So, in the material sense, that's the most like immoral activity. And so Krishna is, so again, both from the moral standpoint also, then Krishna's pastimes are seen as abominable by non-devotees. So we shouldn't be surprised. We shouldn't be surprised when we read these kind of pastimes. That was the point that Mahatma Prabhu was making. Any other questions? Mantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo, Vaishnava ki Jai.
It's good as a celebrating document. Excellent cable. It should be pinched. Amazing stuff.
Which of it was me?
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Take this, it's okay, I'll take this.
Could you stretch yourself? I couldn't remember the verse and I don't know how to switch this whole thing off.